Hello, and thanks for coming to this extra board meeting that Sandy and I requested to discuss a growing crisis in the homeschool world that led to our co-op adopting the now notorious guardianship form. As you all know, at the end of our last meeting, we somewhat hastily approved a new form to be included in our spring registration packet. This form was sent to all families. Most were fine with it. Most of them signed it and returned it, but some complained. As I and some of the other board members considered their complaints, I think many of us started to second guess our decision to adopt this form. This led to side discussions, which led to inquiries, which is what brought us here today. So instead of having these side conversations, Michelle asked if I could put together a summary of what we have learned since our last meeting where this was first brought up, present it today, and then we can discuss how we will proceed from here. So in case you missed our January meeting, we found out and spent some time discussing about a lawsuit that was brought against a co-op in the north suburbs. That co-op was shut down for a time, and one of our board members, Jody, contacted a member of that co-op to basically ask them what happened, and this is her reply. Dear Jody, I don't know all the details, but basically a divorced couple was involved. The man wanted to stick it to the mom, so he complained to DCFS that the kids were unattended. DCFS went in and shut them down. The board members all had to get legal help, and HSLDA couldn't help them as a group. I believe Illinois Christian Home Educators Group did, though. They were able to reopen, but they had to jump through a lot of hoops. I believe that since they were not an actual nonprofit group, that they got scrutinized as individuals, too. Wendy, who also attends a different co-op called Liberty on Wednesdays, brought us a copy of the form they use to protect themselves in situations such as this. So after hearing about this lawsuit, we decided that it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to follow suit and perhaps implement the same form used by Liberty. They explained that the form designates a short-term guardian in the event that they must be absent from co-op. It protects the co-op and the board from liability if something unfortunate were to happen during co-op. That sounded reasonable to us, so we approved the form. It's CFS Form 444-2. You all have copies. And they gave us their limiting language, which basically limits the form to only apply on co-op days during co-op hours. So we adapted that limiting language to be applicable to CWF and sent it off to our members. Not long after, we started getting some pushback. So I'd like to share a message from Dave that I think really succinctly summarizes the issues that our members have. Dear Board, while I'm typically a fan of being proactive and getting in front of a potential situation, I do believe that in this particular situation, this decision is not the wisest. First, the co-op that was shut down was a drop-off situation, which CWF is not and will never be. Second, as the parent is required to stay, we are not in need of assigning guardianship at any time. Third, as a parent, I would never willfully sign away my rights, even temporarily. And fourth, I would certainly not sign any DCFS form, given the notoriety that they have had in other cases against homeschool families. I respectfully ask you all to reconsider this decision. Thank you, Dave. This email stuck with me. I have to admit, I spent a few nights lying in bed wondering if we had made the right decision. And as I thought about this, more concerns came to mind. So I'd like to share with you some of those concerns now. One thing that worries me is, are we creating an implied contract with our families that the board will now be taking responsibility for the directives specified in this form? If they appoint, say, Wendy to be short-term temporary guardian during the hours of co-op, and they step away and something happens to their child, can they now come back to us and say, hey, I appointed Wendy as a guardian. She should have taken care of this if, say, worse comes to worse and non-custodial dad manages to pick up his child. Wendy didn't stop him. We didn't stop him. Did this form offer some sort of assurance that we have measures in place to stop that from happening? Because we do not have any such measures in place, and this form is not going to stop a child from rushing out the door if they see their dad. And then what about Wendy? What about the persons whose name is on this form? Maybe this form will protect us, the board members, but does it protect Wendy? Are we just shifting the burden of responsibility from us, the board members, to our parents, our members of the co-op? I don't think we've really solved a problem if someone else is still taking the fall for this problem. So then we come to the people like Steve, who just refused to sign the form. If Steve were to share his concerns with everyone else, I think it would be pretty soon before no one wants to sign this form. I know I no longer want to sign this form. I don't want to assume responsibility for anyone else. And because of that, I don't feel it's fair to ask someone else to assume it for me. So who is going to make sure that the Steves and me comply with this new policy? Who's going to enforce it? Who on this board has the time or energy to maintain these forms, to collect them, to then watch that every child is only ever being released to the care of their parents or this designated guardian? It's too much. The logistics are too much. And then finally, is this form actually making our children any safer? We didn't create any new security policies. Like I said, a child could see their dad through the big glass doors and rush out to him, and there's nothing to stop that from happening. The doors are all locked from the outside. No one can come in, but because of fire safety, they are push-open doors. Anyone can get out at any time. They can't be locked, and we don't have the resources to guard these doors during the hours of co-op. So the form is not actually making anyone safer. If anything, it's creating an illusion of safety that doesn't actually exist, which may be more dangerous in the end. So to address these questions and concerns, several of you reached out to Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, and National Center for Life and Liberty. HSLDA wasn't any help. Like Andrea said, they only represent individuals, not the co-op, but NCLL did provide a fairly helpful response. And Christine from NCLL says, if parents aren't able to agree on these matters, the court makes the decision, and courts are generally not friendly to homeschooling. I doubt very much if the non-custodial parents in the case you mentioned prevailed. Custody and education disputes are between parents, not schools or education providers. The form you referenced is really not appropriate for the situation. An educator does not become a guardian in any legal sense of the word. Teachers function in loco parentis capacity, but do not have the legal power of a guardian. I also cannot see where such a form would provide any protection for a co-op in a challenge from a parent, because a court would likely not uphold the granting of any such guardianship. So, what this all boils down to for me is, are we protecting ourselves and our children with this form? I don't believe so. I believe it was a knee-jerk reaction, which is understandable, but this isn't the way to go. Christine went on to give a simple solution, and that solution is to screen applicants before they enter the program. We simply require a signed consent form from both parties and or their presence at an introductory meeting that would, and she says that would be the best protection for a co-op in this situation. I tend to agree with her. I think being proactive is better than being reactive. Making sure the parents, both parents, are truly on board with the decision to join this co-op is better than just trying to cover our butts. So thank you for listening to me, and now let's go around the room and get everyone else's input, and then hopefully we can put this matter to rest.